So welcome everybody to our Humanities Talk session 14 of the 7th Polygen Symposium of Rising Scholars. My name is Charlotte Hazard and I will be moderating today's session. I am very excited to be here with these students. I am Director of Admissions, so it's just such a pleasure to see these students come through at the end of their programs. The goal of the symposium is to celebrate and showcase the hard work of our Polygen scholars, all of whom have worked tirelessly on their projects over the past couple months. We have 5 students presenting on a variety of topics today, and a fellow member of the Polygen's team will be scoring each student's presentation, which will help us determine prize winners after the event. So please type your questions in the Q&A if you have any questions for each speaker. And we will have time at the end of the session. We should have plenty of time for the speakers to answer any of your questions. Wonderful. So today's speakers are Misha Meswani. She's in 11th grade from Fremont, California. We have Han N. Chai. She's a senior from Boston, Massachusetts. Lincoln Brown, who's a senior in San Francisco. Ayana Kashikar, who is a senior in Fremont, California as well, and Henry Eisenhardt, who is a senior in Portland, Oregon. And so we will kick this off in just a moment, making sure we have all our attendees here. Wonderful, very exciting. Misha, so are you ready to start? Okay, wonderful. So if we could all turn our screens off, our microphones off, I will do the same. And Misha, I will keep the time for you, okay?
Just to be clear, can everyone see the slideshow?
I can see it. I'm sure the others can too then. Perfect.
Cool. So yeah, I'll start now. So CIO Dive estimates that technology workers are 10.2% less likely to stay in their current positions when compared to non-IT employees. And in a much more broader sense, Talent LMS, a leading management system, presents that 72% of tech employees are thinking of quitting their job over the next year. So what is causing this uncertainty in tech workers? The short answer is attrition and job vacancies. Hello, everyone. My name is Misha Meswani, and I'll be sharing my findings from research that I conducted about attrition and job vacancies in the tech industry after COVID-19. So attrition is when a worker voluntarily moves from one company or one job to another. And there's so many factors involved in their decision to leave. And I thought that this picture clearly explains what attrition is. So this man is jumping from one fishbowl to another, and we're pretty unclear about why that is. Is the other fishbowl bigger? Is it colder in terms of temperature? There can be so many factors. In the same way, there's so many factors why an employee leaves their job. But the 3 main factors that I found that contribute to attrition in the tech industry today are 1, an unhealthy and toxic work environment, 2, compensation, and 3, the war on talent. So moving on to the first problem, which is an unhealthy work environment, McKinsey defines burnout as a chronic imbalance between job demands, workload pressure, and reduced ability to regulate cognitive and emotional processes. Now, if I want to break that down and put that into simpler words, tech workers have very complex jobs with demanding skills and dedicated hours. And this results in high levels of stress, basically just destroying any thought of a proper work-life balance. And this is why employees end up leaving the company. And in fact, Forbes reports that 44% of tech leaders who feel burnt out plan to leave the company. So burnout is definitely a large factor, but remote work is also something that has been especially prevalent after COVID-19. Many workers are used to a work from home environment and staying with their families. They aren't quite ready to fully come back to office. And according to Blind, which is a professional network community, Apple, one of the leading tech giants globally today, is facing attrition due to their decision to slowly transition in person. 56% of Apple professionals are seeking a new job because of the company's new hybrid policy. So clearly, this factor has a big effect on an employee's decision to stay or leave. Career advancement is also the next factor that contributes to attrition. At the end of the day, if employees feel appreciated and recognized for their hard work, it's likely that they'll want to continue their job at the same company. And at the same time, when career advancement is not communicated to employees, it's easy for an employee to feel discouraged and frustrated about their role in a company. But finally, communication challenges is an eye-opening factor. Zoom is obviously a large factor to workers feeling Zoom fatigue or not being as enthusiastic and motivated to communicate and engage with their work. But the root cause of the problem is the main issue. So the Society of Human Resources study revealed that 72% of executives found their company culture improving after COVID-19, but only a mere 14% of employees agreed. So the majority of workers disagreed. So the problem is when executives feel that they're doing their best to maintain work culture, it's also important that tech workers feel the same way. And when we have top level management and employees not on the same page, it's a clear reason why attrition occurs. Now on to some solutions. I found that communication is one of the crucial factors in growing a healthy work environment for workers in all industries, not the technology. The internal link to communication, though, is thorough leadership. At the end of the day, an employer reports back to their leaders or managers, which is why it's important to encourage open communication about what employees need for themselves to succeed. So setting up weekly check-ins different from one-on-ones about work can create an open communication environment for workers to share with their managers about their workload and career goals in general. So it definitely helps an employee feel secure. Empathy is also an important solution. If the workday is just work constantly, employees are bound to feel pretty burnt out. So things like verbal recognition, light team conversations, team bondings are all aspects of culture that an employee might find attractive to stay loyal to the company. But to enforce accountability, a good tip for many top-level companies, such as Meta, is to require quarterly performance reviews. If employees and leaders write about each other and how they're performing and what needs to be done better, there's open communication between them. Also paves out a pretty clear path for employees to look forward to in terms of how they want to shape their careers. But while recruiting, managers and HR employees should also try their best to be as transparent as possible about career paths. It's more likely that an employee will stay loyal to their company if they know exactly what to expect and how to work towards it. But finally, hybrid work is also a pretty balanced solution when it comes to the remote work versus return to office debate. If workers are mandated to return to work 2 to 3 days each week, it's going to be a pretty net benefit. The opportunities that can happen through communication, effective collaboration, and just seeing your teammates in person is far, far better. The next problem that I found is compensation. So the tech industry pays a lot pretty famously. 6-figure salaries are very common amongst tech companies, making the sector pretty competitive. And employees can easily switch jobs to any company that recruits them, offering an increased pay. It's as easy as that. So factors such as salary transparency websites, such as levels.fyi, make it ever so easier for an employee to do this. Levels.fyi specifically lets tech employees research how much other companies are paying their workers for the same role. And the base salaries I found are pretty neck to neck. So when this data is released to the public on similar sites, tech-skilled workers can feel pretty confident that they have an upper hand in negotiating or looking for other jobs. But moving on to the factor of equity, stock prices have been significantly volatile since COVID-19, and I think it's important to note the trend. In March 2020, when COVID-19 started, tech stocks were plummeting, they were falling. But late 2021, tech stocks started to increase, FANG was outperforming. But then when we reached 2022, tech stocks faced a major downfall, and I would say 37% to be precise. So with these tech stocks plummeting, employees who joined the company pre-IPO or during a high stock price in the late months of 2021 are facing a hit to their total salary today. So the perk of offering generous compensation is slowly slipping away from the hands of a company and motivating workers and employees to basically just move to another company with a higher stock price or expectations of a higher stock price. And some solutions for compensation are one, fringe benefits. Fringe benefits can be attractive to an employee when it comes to staying or leaving their job. A sabbatical is also a great incentive to both the workers and the company. Through a sabbatical, workers are encouraged to pursue further studies and improve their skills and become an even more valuable asset to their company. Unlimited PTOs or paid time offs are also great benefits to offer employees. But to not let compensation affect how employees think about leaving companies in a major way, it's also important for a company to be transparent about compensation and how the stock market will be affected by company actions. Transparency plays a pretty big role because in one way, it increases trust between employees that their equity can have a positive future ahead, but it also prepares employees for any negative hits that they might face in equity for a short period of time. So if employees are prepared, it's going to increase the likelihood that they stay loyal. But after conducting a few interviews with experienced tech workers, I've learned that overall compensation should not be an easy solution to decrease worker turnover. For several workers, quality work in their workplace holds a lot more value than just a slight increase in the benefits of a total salary package. Quality work pays out a more clear and secure career progression path, which in turn results in greater compensation and salary when workers do move ahead. So it does bring value and satisfaction for an employee. In regards to equity, many employees may be new to equity in the stock market. So having a basic or training or company-wide education briefing about equity stocks can definitely make sure that employees make right decisions while also reducing fear about drastic stock market changes like we have in the status quo today. But even during recruitment, a recruiter can help a new graduate or a new employee break down and understand their salary report, especially the compensation aspect. Support from the company and recruiter, both of them can build early trust and loyalty, which can impact turnover rates in the future. The last problem I found is the war on talent, which is essentially a company's high demand for highly skilled professionals while also facing the challenge of developing their employees or extending their current resources to fight for new tech talent. And this clearly points to a basic economic concept, which is high demand and low supply, which leads to a shortage of tech talent. The war on talent is especially prevalent in the tech industry because after the pandemic, companies are looking for ways to maintain remote work and keep up with the pandemic's digital requirements. McKinsey points out that grocery e-commerce has grown 5 years worth of growth in just 5 months. So for this to be successful and well-maintained, all businesses need to find room for technological work, and this automatically results in more tech workers, leading to high demand for tech talent. 55% of surveyed employees are finding it hard to hire new employees that match their company's requirements in terms of skill and experience. So clearly job vacancies is a large issue today. Onto the skill gap, which is also an important factor. A study from Pluralsight highlights a few quotes from workers who express their feelings of not knowing enough about back-end processes or development tasks. And instead they find that their company finds a quick solution to this prevalent skill gap, which is hiring new talents. So if you think about it from a viewpoint of an employee, it's pretty demotivating to not have any room to grow within your own company. And this is something employees expect from their employers so that their skills can be used for a longer period of time without the fear of being hired out. This scenario can be compared to an athlete. So if an athlete does not feel that they can improve or grow on their skills, it's pretty valid for them to feel discouraged from the sport itself. Without improving on their skills, it's impossible for an athlete to do better at a sport. And in the same way, it's vital for any employee to feel satisfied or have room to improve within their own company, or career advancement becomes next to impossible. The best way to solve this problem or these overarching problems is upskilling workers. Art Zeal is the CEO of a software products and talent acquisitions company and says that any company that is focused on training is going to win the war on talent. And employees agree with her that they want to be upskilled, and this graph details the reason why tech employees want to be upskilled. They want personal satisfaction, growth, recognition, and so many other factors. Amazon has set a promising goal to spend upwards of $700 million to upskill workers by 2025 in technology skills such as software engineering, AWS cloud, and machine learning. And obviously not all companies can afford to make ambitious goals similar to Amazon, but a small start and investment will definitely bring a positive change. And this small investment can simply be thinking of upskilling with an open mind and exploring the positive benefits that it may bring. And many companies have a fixed mindset towards this approach, which limits workers' growth. But as long as the company leadership puts in time, research, and effort into how much upskilling can actually benefit their workers, it's pretty likely that employees are going to feel appreciated. Now on to wrap up some final thoughts. Among several solutions to reduce attrition and low turnover rates, I found that the common pattern for companies and leadership is transparency. Transparency is basically the internal link to trust between a worker and their company, whether it be an unhealthy work environment, competitive compensation, or even the war on talent. Employees need to feel secure to the point where they're being consistently appreciated and communicated with. But I also found that the key takeaway from this talk, I guess, is the importance of balance. Companies need to ensure that while staying competitive, their employees are also being offered a balanced, healthy work environment for them to grow in. Yes, money does hold its priority, but quality job functions and a fulfilling employee experience definitely holds its unique values. And in a similar manner, there also needs to be a balance established between excessive hiring and upskilling workers to reduce turnover. Companies really need to ask themselves if they prioritize loyal workers or short-term solutions to narrow the skill gap. But finally, although the Great Resignation has been a persistent problem, the tech industry has been recently experiencing changes. Hiring policies have changed drastically to the point where some companies are enforcing hiring freezes and conducting layoffs in response to the incoming recession or the recession that's already happened. So to an extent, hiring freezes can also impact attrition and turnover rates for workers who are looking for a more secure job. So the question I'll leave you with today is, will there ever be a time of certainty for tech workers? But yeah, thank you. It's the end of my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Misha. That was so interesting. And I do have many questions for you. And audience members, please put questions in the Q&A and save your questions for the end as well. And I really look forward to hearing more from Misha after we ask her some questions. So I'm going to remove the spotlight right now. And Han and Chai, I am going to ask you to begin your presentation. Very excited. I am also going to spotlight you as well. So if everybody could also turn off their cameras, mute themselves, and we can get started. Thank you, Hanan.
Can everyone see my screen?
Right now it says you've started screen sharing, but I'm not seeing anything. Misha, Lincoln, are you seeing anything on your end?
Okay, wait, let me. How about this?
I'm not seeing anything here. I just want to make sure the others aren't either.
It's saying she started, but there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Okay.
My recommendation is I think you can send me your presentation by email, and then I can present it on my screen and share my screen, and I can just have Lincoln go ahead of you. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put my email right in the chat. There we go. And just send that to me, and I will see what I can do on my end. Okay. So Lincoln, it's your turn then. Are you ready to present?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Go for it.
Can everyone see that correctly?
We can see it.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Lincoln Brown, and I'm going to be talking to you today about how ACL injuries affect offensive skill positions in the NFL, National Football League. So to start off, I want to speak to why I chose this topic. For one, I tore my own ACL in a football game last year, and during my recovery process, I felt extremely discouraged, but also curious about how I would eventually recover. To aid my own recovery process and understand better, I chose to expand on my interest and research how ACL injuries affect each offensive skill position in the NFL. I also have a love for the NFL. I've been watching it for a long time. And lastly, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I wanted to find closure on my own injury and figure out how I would recover. So what is an ACL tear? ACL stands for anterior cruciate ligament. It's a ligament in the knee, and when you tear it, it's a very serious knee injury. It happens mostly when the knee severely abducts or caves in. And most people will hear a pop when it happens, indicating that that ligament has teared. Due to the mechanism of the injury, most ACL tears are non-contact, meaning that another player doesn't have to hit you and cave your knee in to cause that ACL tear. With the severity of the injury, most players are out for at least 9 months, and that can be up to a year, which can be extremely draining on the athlete mentally and physically. So ACL tears in the NFL. In American football, the fast-moving nature and changing direction is inevitably going to cause ACL injuries. And the majority of ACL injuries in offensive positions come from skill positions, those being running back, RB, wide receiver, WR, quarterback, QB, and tight end. And they're extremely prevalent in the NFL, having 62 ACL tears per year. So moving into my methodology section, I decided to examine 4 offensive skill positions with tangible efficiency metrics. Those being the those being the ones I mentioned before. For those efficiency metrics, I used rushing yards per game for running backs, receiving yards per game for wide receivers and tight ends, and quarterback rating for quarterbacks, which is a stat that ranks a quarterback performance from a scale of 0 to 100. To get the data on these efficiency metrics, I used the website Pro Football Reference, which is a reputable NFL statistical database. To compare how an ACL injury affected the trajectory of a given player, I examined control players as well. For each injured player, I chose 2 to 3 players with a similar career path and statistics to that point in their careers. And I chose these players to compare whether the ACL tear affected the injured athlete. To see if they had a drop off compared to the control player. And moving on to my analysis. So the first, I split quarterbacks up into 2 separate categories, dual threat and pocket passer. And I defined dual threat as a quarterback who rushes for over 20 yards per game. One prominent dual threat quarterback that we saw tear their ACL was Robert Griffin III. Griffin saw a decrease in 56.2% in his QBR from 50.4 to 28.3. He also saw a rushing yards per game decrease from 54.3 yards per game to 37.6, as well as we saw his passing statistics fall. Another dual threat quarterback, Carson Wentz, had actually similar QBR numbers both prior to and after tearing his ACL. However, his rushing yards per game dropped from 23.0 to 8.5. And that decrease in rushing yards can mostly be attributed to the decrease in athleticism or confidence in that knee rushing the ball after his injury. Additionally, it could have been attributed to a loss of elusiveness or athleticism, which could allow defenses to focus more on the passing game, making it more challenging for dual threat quarterbacks like him to throw the ball downfield after the injury. So moving on to the second type of quarterback, the pocket passer. Of the 2 styles of quarterback, pro style quarterbacks or pocket passers have generally shown to recover better from ACL tears. One notorious example is Tom Brady, who showed an increase in 18.2% from 59.5 to 74.1 in QBR in the year after tearing his ACL. And we know what he has become. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. And in concurrence, other pro-style quarterbacks such as Carson Palmer and Teddy Bridgewater showed increases in their QBR in the years after tearing their ACLs as well. The reason why these pro-style quarterbacks typically show similar pre- and post-ACL statistics is that pro-style quarterbacks don't heavily rely on their athleticism to get the job done. They don't rely on lateral quickness or speed to be productive. Therefore, tearing their ACL, an injury that threatens those traits, would not have a large negative effect on them. So moving on to running backs. What we see with running backs is they primarily decrease in production after tearing their ACLs. One example is Edgar and James, who saw a 43.9% decrease in his yards per game after tearing his ACL. Similar to that, Stephon Ridley and Ronnie Brown saw decreases as well. And that drop in production most likely stemmed from that, as I talked about before, that loss of elusiveness, lateral quickness, athleticism after undergoing that injury. But what's interesting is that we do see an outlier in this, namely Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson actually improved significantly to have an MVP, most valuable player season after tearing his ACL. He increased his yards per game 47.4% from 80.8 to 131.1. But since this is one of the only players that we've ever seen do this, it can be concluded that he was probably just someone who healed remarkably and retained their physical attributes after even after undergoing the surgery. So with wide receivers, we see the same general trend going on as with the running backs. We see wide receivers like Kelvin Benjamin, Reggie Wayne, Jordy Nelson, Paul Richardson all see decreases in their production after they tore their ACL. However, we do see another outlier in Keenan Allen, who increased his yards per game 32.1% from 63.0 to 87.0. Now that advances in modern medicine certainly were probably a factor in the recovery of a receiver like Keenan Allen. However, as I said with Adrian Peterson, he probably just recovered better from the others and is a true outlier. Moving on to the tight end position, tight ends Rob Gronkowski and Hunter Henry followed the same trajectory after tearing their ACLs. They both dropped in yards per game average, but then held that same level of production for years plus after their injury. And some possible explanation for this is just like the pocket passer quarterbacks, tight ends don't have to totally rely on their athleticism to get the job done. They can rely more on strength and savvy sitting in different parts of the zone to get their yards and be productive to the team. So moving on to my final conclusions. It's clear that ACL tears have somewhat of effect on all the positions. However, they're much more prevalent in running backs and wide receivers, as well as dual threat quarterbacks, as opposed to pocket passer quarterbacks and tight ends. Now, I just want to end this by saying what you can take away from my research. Players like myself who tore their ACLs can have a reasonable prediction of their return to performance given their respective positions. Also, my research can lower anxiety in the recovery process because I know I felt a lot of that. And it can show both amateur and professional teams how well a position will come back after an ACL tear, helping the coaches and the staff game plan for the future and run a successful team. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you so much, Lincoln. So everybody, questions in the Q&A, we'll ask them at the end. I'm going to remove the spotlight right now. And Lincoln, if you could stop sharing your screen. Perfect. Thank you so much. And then Hanan, hello. If you want to give it another try, try sharing your screen. If not, I'll share mine.
Okay.
So let's see how it goes.
Can you see my screen?
It worked. Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful, Hanan. Take it away.
Wait. Because I have speaker notes, are you seeing my speaker notes right now?
I see them here, yes.
Okay.
It's okay if we see them.
Yeah. Wait, let me think.
You could pull up two browsers.
Yeah, I
right?
did. So is my screen changing right now?
Yes, it switches from one to the next. So here I see, here I don't see notes. And then the other one I see add notes on the right-hand side.
Yeah, so, okay. I think you probably have to share a screen.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I will share. So everybody has to let me know if you could see my screen now. So it's my turn to ask this question. And then I'm going to make it full screen. So Han-En, how does this look to you? Does it look good?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I am going to turn my screen off and mute myself, and then just let me know when you need me to switch slides. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. And actually, I'm also going to spotlight you. Actually, I won't spotlight you since I'm sharing my screen. I worry that's going to do something strange. Okay. So I'm going to stop my video. Thank you so much, Hanan. I look forward to hearing your presentation.
So my topic is, how does false eyewitness testimonies affect the victim's testimony and the memory of the details and the process of crime? Next page. So human memories can't perfectly reproduce the past. People often think of memory as something like a video recorder that accurately stores everything that happens. However, in reality, memory is very easy to get distorted. Next page. So when they get distorted, it creates a false memory. So what is a false memory? A false memory is a recollection of memory that never happened in reality. It's different from simple memory errors because it creates a brand new memory that never happened. Since it creates memory, it strongly affects the validity of memory. And there are a few factors that could cause false memory. First is misinformation effect and suggestions. Misinformation effect and suggestions are very similar. They could both occur after the crime. So the witnesses and or the victim are exposed to misleading information after the incident, and then they create a false memory. Next page. So talking about eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony is the first-hand account of an event witnessed by victim or witnesses. It sounds like a reliable statement. However, it has a low accuracy. In reality, there are about 28% of cases that involves a false eyewitness testimony, therefore causes a false accusations. It has a low accuracy because it really depends on the conditions of the witness when they are witnessing the incident. For example, their health conditions, stress, memory contamination, and race. Next page. So let's take a look at a case study. In 2014, there are 2 teachers and 6 janitors were accused of child sexual abuse by 3 children at an international school in Indonesia. The children's testimony were critical because there wasn't forensic evidence to support the testimonies. Eventually, the teachers and janitors were imprisoned for 7 to 11 years. In this case, victim and witnesses' testimony were heavily relied on because there isn't any supportive forensic evidence to prove the existence of sexual abuse. Therefore, in the investigation and prosecution, the testimonies became very important. However, the judges had suspected if the children's mother had instructed them to tell those testimony of sexual abuse. However, there isn't any evidence to support that suspect. Next page. So the question leads to, does the victim always tell the truth of the incident? Next page. And is it possible to alter victim's testimony? Next page. In my research, I decided to do a literature review. There are a few reasons that I decided to do that. First is because lack of related research. Most research tend to focus on a single type of testimonies, and not many research build a connection between victim testimony and eyewitness testimony. In my research, my hypothesis is that if the witness's testimony includes misleading information, there is a high possibility the victim's testimony will alter after hearing the witness's testimony. Based on my hypothesis, I focus on 4 related research. The first study is about stress and misleading effect. Second study is about relationship between perpetrator and victim. Third study is about different roles causes alternation of memories. And fourth study is about misinformation effect on different information levels. Next page. So for study 1, study 1s tend to testify if the phrasing of the question and stress influence the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. So the researchers, they chose a real life gun shooting event that happened in Canada. There are multiple witnesses. However, not all the witnesses participate in this research. There are a few reasons that the researchers chose this case. First is because there are enough eyewitnesses, and second is because there are enough forensic evidence to determine the validity of the eyewitness testimony. So the method of the research is that first, the witnesses will be asked to describe the situation of the incident. Second, the police will ask a few questions to clarify. The questions that the police ask are mixed with misleading questions. The purpose of mixing misleading questions is that the researchers want to know if it's possible for eyewitness to alter their testimonies after hearing a different information that they remembered. And then the witness will rate their stress level from 1 to 7, 1 remaining extremely calm and 7 remain extremely stressed. Next page. So before we talk about the result of study 1, we need to know about the different types of details. So when the witnesses answer police questions, their answers are separated into 3 different types of details: action details, personal descriptive details, and object description details. So action details are the actions between victim and perpetrator. So if we will look at the small picture on the left, we will see that the man is trying to use a pillow to hit the woman. The hit is the action details. And then it's personal descriptive details, the details about victim or perpetrator. So if we look at the woman in the middle, we will see that she has a black hair, black shirt, blue pants, and black shoes. Black hair, black shirt, and blue pants and black shoes describes the woman. Therefore, it's a personal descriptive details. And then it's object description details, is the details of the object appeared in the crime scene. For example, if we look at the car, it is a red car. Red describes the car, therefore it's the object description details. Next page. So if we look at the result, we can see that study 1 has like a generally high accuracy after 4 to 5 months of the incident. However, they have a low accuracy on personal details, and they have more errors on descriptive details, which includes object and personal details than action details. For a misleading question, it does have an effect on a few witnesses, especially the witness that didn't witness the whole crime. For example, there was a female witness that thought the witness with a gun was a perpetrator. However, that wasn't true. And for the stress level, it shows that all witnesses doesn't have much stress. Therefore, in this research, it showed that time and stress doesn't have much influence in the accuracy of witnesses' testimony. However, the phrasing of the question does have an influence. Next page. So let's take a look at study 2. So study 2 tends to testify the relationship between amnesia and betrayal of caregiver. So before we talk about the research, we have to know about interpersonal trauma. So interpersonal trauma is emotional abuse, physical abuse, and or sexual abuse in childhood or adulthood. And this could lead to distortion of memory. In this research, they want to testify the reality of betrayal trauma theory. So betrayal trauma theory is that children sexually abused by their caregiver that could cause amnesia. And the method for study 2 is that the participants will ask you answer any question that is yours. The question includes age of the victim, relationship between sexual perpetrator, and so on. The result of study 2 is that stronger victim-perpetrator relationships has more likely to have distorted memories in sexual abuse cases. With this result, it highlighted the importance of obtaining specific details of sexual cases. In this research, it shows that strong victim-perpetrator relationship does have a strong influence in victim's testimony and the cause of amnesia. Next page. So let's take a look at study 3. Study 3 tends to testify whether a victim and perpetrator systematically tells different story of the same event. So it's widely believed that perpetrator lies to escape from responsibility. However, we can also argue that victim could also lie to escape from responsibility. So for the method of study 3, participants are asked to complete a measure of stealth-ing. So the researchers asked the participant to complete the measure of stealth-ing is that the experiment concerned personality of verbal communications. And then the participants are asked to read 2 stories about 2 college students. And then they need to retell the story out loud to the researchers. And then the participants need to answer questions asked by the researchers and then complete a letter of identification. At last, they need to rewrite the story from the first or third person perspective. So the result of study 3 is that victim and perpetrator distort their stories in about the same extent. and self-advantages has a great impact of the cause of distorted memories. So what is self-advantages? For example, if the perpetrator was shot by the victim, and the truth of being shot helped the perpetrator to escape from responsibility, then perpetrator wouldn't lie about the truth of being shot. In this research, it has shown that victim and perpetrator lies in about the same level. Therefore, it's very possible for victims to lie in their testimonies based on their self-advantages. Next page. For study 4 tends to testify the convictions.
Han, I'm going to cut in here and just try if we could maybe move on to the conclusions and skip study number 4 just because we're running out of time.
Okay.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me move here. Is this okay here?
No, you have to jump. I did 2 more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this one. So
okay.
Before we're talking about the conclusion, we have to separate the timeline of a crime into 3 parts. So it's before the crime, during the crime, after the crime. So before the crime, nothing really happens. During the crime is that victim is harmed and the perpetrator is committing the crime. And after the crime is that perpetrator finished committing the crime and may got arrested or they escaped. Next page. So for my conclusions, there are 2 periods that could alter testimonies during the crime and after the crime. So the factors that could alter testimony during the crime are victim-perpetrator relationship, different types of details, different information level that code into our brain, and different roles by different people, act by different people. For example, the person who is a victim plays a role of the victim. And for after the crime are misleading information, misleading questions, and misleading post-event information. Next page. So to answer my hypothesis, we have to recall my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that if the witness's testimony includes misleading information, there is a high possibility the victim's testimony will alter after hearing the witness's testimony. My result didn't fully answer our hypothesis because of a few reasons. First, false victim testimony isn't mainly based on misinformation or suggestion. If testimony altered, we can't determine if its misinformation effect occurred or not. So to answer my hypothesis, it is possible for victim testimony to alter based on false eyewitness testimony. Next page. For future work, we would like to suggest to form connections between testimonies such as perpetrator, victim, and eyewitnesses. Meanwhile, it's also important to look if other testimonies act as a misinformation that could cause false memories or false testimonies. Also, if it's significant alternations of testimony occurred after listening to other testimony, the current discussions can inform professionals concerning these testimonies. And last but not least, it is important to include field research in my topic. And questions? And thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. And I think we'll move on to our 4th speaker now, Ayana. I think it's your turn. So you're ready to share your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Can you see that?
I see loading.
Okay, can you see it now?
I can see it now.
Okay, great. So my name is Ayana, and my project is on the mental and physical impacts of period poverty in India. So a little bit of background, period poverty is an exponentially increasing problem within several developing countries, especially India. Often unhygienic and hazardous menstrual products, which are readily available to lower income women, are used in place of more expensive sanitary items like pads and tampons. Materials such as fabric-based cloths and rags, which are washed and then reused, are really common options. However, many girls and women are subject to the use of toilet paper, gauze, newspaper, mattress stuffing, and even cow dung. So a little bit of an introduction. In India, socioeconomic inequality manifests its way into the lives of millions of girls and women, deeply affecting their menstrual hygiene and the degree of access to sanitary pads. The level of education, average family income, and the urban-rural divide all constitute the inequalities faced by these women. While wealth is identified as one of the key drivers of unequal access to menstrual hygiene management, or MHM, other socioeconomic, environmental, and household factors require urgent policy attention. This specifically includes the lack of safe MHM spaces, which threaten the health and dignity of women and girls. Consequently, this proves that effective hygienic management of menstruation is essential to women across India and other underprivileged countries in order to properly and actively participate in society, boost dignity, and promote gender equality and reproductive health. And here we have figure 8, which are just a couple of reasons for why women can't use sanitary pads during menstruation. And a lot of it is because of unavailability. So some of the effects. Several qualitative and quantitative works have uncovered the psychosocial consequences of inadequate MHM. Feelings of shame, anxiety, and just being distracted at school and work have been described across a range of contexts. These studies across India have worked to show that the shame and fear faced by these women are a direct result of cultural stigma, therefore preventing the free movement of these affected women in society. This social isolation further impacts the mental health of the women, causing anxiety and even depression, as they feel they are underdeserving or just simply not of societal importance. Several studies have focused on menarche, or a girl's first period, reporting that high proportions of girls feel unprepared and afraid during their first menstruation. In summary, this feeling of unpreparedness and confusion greatly harms the mental health of menstruating girls. Moreover, depending on who the girls speak to in order to receive advice altogether, their levels of confidence can fluctuate. With a reported 70% of girls advised by their mothers and 16% by older sisters, it is to no surprise that the quality of their knowledge varies. If the girls' mothers themselves did not receive ample or even correct information regarding monthly menstrual cycles, they wouldn't be able to properly teach their children. So in fact, a mother's education level is directly correlated with their child's reaction and understanding of their menstrual cycle. So the more educated the mother, the more secure and confident the daughters feel themselves. Through a physical lens, existing research connects unhygienic conditions for using, cleaning, and drying MH products to reproductive tract infections, and points to cases of the economically vulnerable even having transactional sex for sanitary pads, which often leads to unwanted pregnancies and an increased dropout rate. Interestingly enough, some perceivably safe measures thought to improve hygiene are actually correlated with infections. For example, the increased rate of body overwashing, living underneath the poverty line, drying absorbents inside the house, and storing these absorbents in the bathroom or just close to latrines are all seen to be correlated with bacterial vaginosis, or BV. So figure 7 kind of shows causes of absenteeism from schools, and there is a pretty large fraction, about 38%, just with the fear of menstrual leakage, and shame and socioeconomic belief are also factors that play into that. Figure 3 shows different sources of information about menstruation. So here we can see that almost 70% of girls do go to their mothers. And if 46% of these mothers are illiterate, the children are not getting the ample information that they need, which can definitely cause anxiety. So what are some interventions? Although the price of both menstrual products and underpants are low, the two still serve as a major barrier to MHM. As menstrual products and underpants are often much too expensive or simply inaccessible, providing these women with both clean pads and cheap ways to create them is a huge way to help mitigate period poverty. Moreover, this provision aids in mitigating material deprivation, reducing concerns of staining exterior clothing, and lastly, just alleviating physical discomfort. Another intervention that lowers the barriers to MHM are water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, or WASH systems. Improvements to WASH access makes it possible for women to clean their absorbents and genitals in a safe manner, as well as reducing discomfort and increasing personal hygiene. Open pit toilets, or toilets without disposal facilities, mean that blood or used sanitary products are clearly displayed when a woman is menstruating, resulting in embarrassment or stigma. This continued cultural stigma and embarrassment then also has the capability of turning into anxiety, making women scared to use the bathroom when they are menstruating, which can lead to BV. In addition, banana fiber pads, or BFPs, are promising considerations as a non-invasive yet reusable alternative to fulfill MHM needs in populous countries such as India. Being a reusable product, the BFP's concern is that bacteria might grow on it, but they have found that the microbial load on a BFP reused for almost 3 years is similar to that of an unused one, proving that the product, when used safely, is an excellent alternative to regular pads. Nonprofit efforts have also been on the rise in order to help mitigate period poverty. The PAD Project, for one, manufactures one dignity kit for $10 US and can serve up to 300 menstruators for 1 year in India. The PAD Project also works to help mitigate period poverty while falling in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. So SDGs are an urgent call for action by all countries in a global partnership. Specifically, some of the SDGs that the PAD Project focuses on are SDGs 3, 4, 5, 6, and 12, which are good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, and finally, responsible consumption and production. And of course, improving the understanding of menstruation, such as the knowledge of cycle length and requirements for hygiene, is the most important way to improve management practices, self-efficacy, and just to reduce anxiety in general. Luckily, there has been an increase in health classes taught in public schools, hopefully decreasing the cultural taboos menstruation possesses and the current shame that students may face. So in conclusion, improper MHM paired with a lack of knowledge often leads to bacterial infections and is associated with an increase in anxiety and depression. However, upcoming technological advances and nonprofit organizations recognize the impacts of period poverty. So hopefully the increase of these foundations will kickstart the global effort to mitigate it altogether. And these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayana. And I'm sorry, everybody, that we've gone a little bit over time, but I think it's important to hear all of these students' work the whole way through. And so we have our final presenter, Henry. Are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Henry. I really appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to stop my video and just let me know if you run into any problems.
Perfect. Hopefully you can see all of this.
I see it.
Okay, perfect. I'm just getting everything set up. So I basically chose the topic that I studied because I want to connect my desire to learn about the economy with my own past experience having lived in Ukraine. So I decided on this, which is the effects of annexation on unemployment, a synthetic control model of the 2014 Crimean annexation. Before we get into like the actual synthetic control model, it's important to understand the background and pre-annexation political climate in Ukraine. The tensions really began to rise in 2014 as the President Yanukovych at the time began moving ever closer to Moscow in his policies. During this time, the Ukrainian people wanted more separation from Russia and move towards a more Western European society, be that partnering with the European Union or NATO, just some sort of movement towards the West. This obviously angered Russia as they want to keep close allies with Ukraine. So they decided there's something that needs to be done. In 2014, a referendum was issued in Crimea, basically gathering information from the populace as to whether they wanted to secede from Ukraine. When the results came back, the polls were astounding, saying that the vast majority of people did, in fact, in Crimea want to secede from Ukraine. However, it was later found out that that referendum was like in sort of rigged, with the true number of people wanting to leave Ukraine way fewer than the polls showed. Anyways, Russia relied on those numbers and began mounting troops on the border. Russia sort of used the past shared cultural identity of Crimea with Russia, be that through shared historical figures or painters, any sort of just their shared history and sort of the idea of people being able to determine their own rights to justify their invasion. Thus, in 2014, the annexation began and the troops entered into Crimea. So now we can sort of get into what a synthetic control model is. You can basically think of a synthetic control model as creating like a new fake Ukraine that was never annexed. This allows us to see an alternate outcome in my situation. This alternate outcome is a timeline where Ukraine would never had Crimea annexed. And this allows us to study, in my case, unemployment. There, of course, are also countless other implementations for synthetic control models, be that after an implementation of a new bill or whatever, just period of time, whatever treatment you're giving it, there's just sort of countless implementations that can be used across the board in different fields. So to be able to carry out a synthetic control model, you need to gather different indicators. In my situation, I chose percentage of eligible youth enrolled in secondary education, population, inflation of consumer prices, government spending in final consumption, net investment spending in non-financial assets, exports of goods and services, and unemployment rates. We take these indicators and we gather information from surrounding countries of Ukraine. These countries need to be similar in just all these aspects, culturally as well and statistically. This allows us to create the most accurate sort of fake Ukraine. After we run this through the R program, we get the weighting of these different indicators. Just in case it wasn't known, the weighting is out of a 1.0. So you can see sort of the significance of each of these indicators on unemployment. School enrollment came out to be a 0.207. GDP growth was a 0.05. Government final consumption was a 0.001. Net investment in non-financial assets was a 0.077. Exports of goods and services was 0.104. Unemployment was a 0.153. Inflation of consumer prices was a 0.112. And population was a 0.29. This sort of shows the relative overall importance of each of these indicators, with government final consumption being the least important and school enrollment being the highest importance. We're also able to see the countries we used in this synthetic control model and how important they were in this process. The countries we decided to take each of these indicators from were Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Moldova, and Georgia. And here shows the relative importance of these countries as well. Looking at Estonia and Latvia, you can tell that none of the information from them was taken into account. While Belarus had nearly half the information, half of the weighting was towards Belarus. This makes sense as Belarus culturally and sort of statistically is the most similar country to Ukraine. All this together allows the program to create a graph to show us our results. Here, the solid line is the treated Ukraine. And basically what the treated Ukraine means is that that's the real life situation. Those are the real statistical values. And the dotted line is the synthetic Ukraine, which is the one made up by the program. What we want to happen is for the lines before 2014 to be as close to each other as possible. This will basically show us the reliability and accuracy of the numbers after the treatment, which is the annexation, occurred. Looking at this graph after 2014, you can see an obvious increase in unemployment in the real life Ukraine after the annexation. And in the synthetic Ukraine that was never annexed, the unemployment rate continues to drop at a steady pace. Moving on, we can see our gaps are also known as like a residual graph for the treated versus synthetic. Here, the synthetic, the fake Ukraine is shown as the horizontal line, while the treated real life Ukraine is shown as the solid black line once again. Here, it sort of looks like before 2014, there are differences, but looking more closely at the scale, there's really only at most a 1% difference before 2014, though afterwards there's a relatively significant difference. Finally, we also are able to get this placebo graph, which shows what would happen if different aspects of if the different indicators were weighted with different proportions. And it shows emboldened the sort of order of weightings that the program found to be best prior to the annexation and then afterwards. So you can just sort of get a relative look at what would happen if you decide to like manually tweak the indicators and all of that. Finally, we're able to get to like our conclusion, sort of the importance of this all. Through this research, we're able to understand the impacts of global conflicts on specific economies. We can better inform policy and decision makers. We can aid in post-conflict decision making in arranging sort of humanitarian help. And we're also able to understand how annexations affect countries in political turmoils. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Henry, and thank you everybody for attending. And so if you have any questions, this would be the time. The good news is, even though we went over, most of our attendees actually stayed. And so that's really great. And it's a testament to how interesting your talks were. I feel like I learned a lot. So does anybody have any questions? You can put them right in the Q&A. I can read them out. Anything is on your mind. I know I have some questions, and maybe I can start off by asking really what drew you each to your research topics. They're pretty varied here, and I would love to hear just a little bit more about that. Why don't we start with Henry? Actually, you just presented. So what drew you to this topic?
So what really drew me to my topic was I wanted to connect, like I said in my presentation, my like passion for economics and the economy with something else that's happened in my life. And I was fortunate enough to be able to live in Ukraine when I was younger. So I was like, given the current political climate at the time with the current Russian annexation or invasion, I decided it would be cool to touch on something in the past that already happened in Ukraine.
And anything really surprise you, take you by surprise in your research, either in the process or in the research itself?
I feel like in the research itself, what surprised me the most was how important education is to unemployment. I mean, obviously it makes sense given that higher education allows you to have more secure, more advanced, more sort of productive jobs. And it also makes sense in the field, and like the idea that if there's a conflict happening, obviously kids will no longer be able to go to school. I just found it interesting to see like that actual connection in numbers.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, but it was a very smooth presentation too, and all of you really gave just very good presentations. I'm extremely impressed. And so Han En, what drew you to your research actually in testimony?
So it's actually a really long story. So my mom kind of gave me this idea, but like I was really always into forensic psychology, and like I was really interested. And so like the question is like, do people always tell the truth? That's my question, because the people we think that may tell the truth may be actually lying, and we make out like lied, like we make out like fool by them. But like for example, if you go to like those TV shows, it sometimes present like maybe the murderer was probably telling the truth, and the victim is probably like actually the real murderer of the of the crime. So yeah.
Yeah, and then the whole plot is trying to figure out, well, who is telling the truth, right? It is that important, right? It's at the center of storytelling, right? Is it the truth or is it not? Yeah, it's very interesting. And Misha and Ayana, what drew you to your research?
Thank you, Charlotte. Apologize for the background noise because I'm in a car.
Yes,
but
I know we ran over. I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. But I guess what drove me was my passion for economics and my growing interest in the human resources industry, and like having family members and having close friends who are in the technology industry and hearing from them about buzzwords such as the Great Resignation and the war on talent. I felt kind of interested in why this actually happens, because I guess, as I stated in my presentation, there are so many factors to like why someone can leave a company, but I just kind of wanted to break them down into some main reasons and what effects they have and what solutions can be found.
Definitely. It was so interesting. And it's so, what I took from your presentation is kind of the careful balance, right, that you have to make in HR or as a manager, right? It's like, how much do you want to work with existing talent? You were talking about upskilling, and it's very interesting for me being in tech, right? And polygents, right? And so just thinking about that, and it was just really fascinating. So I took a lot away from that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
And Ayana, what drew you to your topic?
So when I was younger, my mom would always tell me how like privileged and lucky we were to have access to these like menstrual products, and she'd tell me about how family back home didn't have any access, and they would use like old rags and t-shirts. And so I wanted to know kind of how far that that went and how it affected their daily lives, because I could imagine like it wouldn't be easy to go to school and go to work with like sawdust or rags, you know. So I just wanted to see, the impacts of that.
And anything very surprising in your learnings or in the research process?
I just didn't expect them to use like cow dung. I know that is one of the ways they like, I don't know, the ways they manage their period, and I just feel like that's really surprising and probably not safe at all. So yeah,
definitely that is extremely surprising for sure. And for the sake of time, I want the attendees to know the session is over. I'm seeing if there are any Q&A, any questions in the Q&A. I'm not seeing any right now, but the session is over, and it was just really interesting. And I have to say, I've been teaching for 10 plus years, for a really long time. And your PowerPoints and your way of presenting, I mean, this is like beyond undergraduate level, right? Like you all did a phenomenal job, but I'm not just saying that. So thank you so much for your hard work. I hope you took a lot away from it. And I want to do a small plug. We have a panel in 7 minutes that I'm running with 2 mentors about their undergraduate experiences. If you want to learn more about undergrad, as you start thinking about that, where to apply and that kind of thing. So that's starting at 2. I invite you to join that. And if there's nothing else, I wish you all a wonderful day, and thank you for your really hard, great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you for coming.